Welcome to the Green Living Gurus. I am Therese Fortin Barnes, your head guru and host of this broadcast. And today we are talking with Kevin Connors. And Kevin owns a firm in Buffalo, New York called Logic Studio. He's the founder and principal of the architectural and engineering firm. And it's dedicated to sustainable agriculture and community revitalization. Mr. Connors, Kevin Connors, has taught design and sustainable architecture in the Department of Architecture at SUNY Buffalo from 1998 to 2008. His design and build students have created the first permitted straw bale building in the city of Buffalo, which is very, very cool. He has worked with natural buildings, which are ultra low embodied energy. We'll hear about some of these details, and high performance buildings, including a passive house detailed renovation in Kenmore, New York. Another thing we will talk about, passive buildings. So Kevin has written articles on architecture for Traffic East magazine. He's published a paper in Eco Architecture in 2006 entitled Natural Building Systems, Experiments in Urban Ecology. And he has 42 years of professional experience in architecture and engineering. And today I asked Kevin to talk with me about sustainable materials, whether you're remodeling or building, and he has so much knowledge in this area. And I talked to Kevin, I said, with COVID and everybody inside their homes, I've heard that it's record numbers of people out there spending money on materials and paint and remodeling and hiring architects. And there's a lot of people wanting to do things in their home because they couldn't go anywhere else, and why not? It's a good time to do it. But traditional building and remodeling materials can also include less than healthy and even dangerous materials. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. There's green designs that make your home healthier by maximizing the fresh airflow, which is very important, and reducing the indoor air pollution, which a home is much more polluted than outdoor air. Not a lot of people know that. So by using safe materials, you can reduce the toxins that you are exposed to in your home. So making educated design choices can make your home a healthier, more comfortable space and add to your overall quality of life and health. So welcome, Kevin. I really appreciate you joining me today. This is an exciting topic, I think, for everybody, because not a lot of people really know all the ins and outs of things that you can do in your home to make it a healthier home.
Great, good to be here, Therese. Thanks for inviting me.
You are welcome. And so you started Logic Studio in 1998. You've been around for a while. What got you on the path of green building construction?
You know, I was thinking about that before this session. And I think, you know, I was always interested in it, and I think it's part of my, it's corny to say it, I guess, but I guess religious background. I'm not really religious now. I consider myself a spiritual person, but I grew up with sort of Franciscan ideology, and respecting environment, you know, was sort of part of what was ingrained in me. So I've always been interested in green design, even before, you know, people knew the word sustainability and green. In my old practice 22 years ago, I was with another firm, and we did sustainable design meetings, and they were really just trying to find out, well, how do we do this? You know, what are people doing, and how do they do it? And eventually the economy sort of caught up. You know, manufacturers were publishing the green qualities of their products and things like that. So I started doing a project in 2004, a natural building project with a group called the Natural Building Colloquium. So it's natural builders are builders that it comes from like alternative building, from the 60s, people trying to build houses with tires and dirt and, whatever they had at hand. And that's kind of the principle of it. And that's a very sustainable principle to build with what's at hand. That's been going on for 20,000 years, And so I realized when I was working on those projects with those builders that there's more than just sort of there's actually a spiritual quality to it, and the hand built quality. It doesn't work for everybody. It works for designer builders, people who want to build their own house. It is beginning to be looked at for production building, but the idea is to use natural materials, to use recycled materials, low embodied energy materials, and try to keep the carbon content or the embodied carbon of building projects low. So at that point, I decided this is really all I want to do. I had a company called Kevin Connors and Associates, and I decided to change the name to Ecologic Studio. And yeah, that was it. We haven't gone backwards. We've experimented with a lot of things since then and learned a lot. And where we're at right now is trying to build the lowest operational energy buildings. You mentioned passive house as a means of doing that. It also maximizes indoor air quality, and also to minimize the embodied carbon in buildings. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, let's jump right into what is a passive house, since you just mentioned that.
Yeah.
And explain a passive house, because I don't think a lot of people really understand what it is, because it's pretty fascinating. And I know you've been building these, or did you just start building them, or
Well, we've
design them?
passive house is a standard. It's like a rating system, like LEED is a rating system.
Right.
Well building, you might be familiar with indoor air quality. And it is sort of the gold standard in terms of energy efficiency. So the principles are a super insulated house, and we've been doing that, and you've read about super insulated houses since the 60s, probably. Super insulated, airtight, that's something a little bit new, but we're striving to make our buildings as airtight as possible. And that's because you can have a super insulated house, but if you've got air infiltration, you basically defeated the purpose. It's like wearing a nice, beautiful down jacket, but not zipping it up.
Yeah.
Which is not uncommon. You see that a lot. But
Right.
So you have your down jacket, your super insulated building. You make it airtight, so you've got it zipped up. You've got your muffler on and whatever else. And as soon as you do that, you need to have heat or energy recovery ventilation, and that's a constant supply of fresh air. But that fresh air is tempered by the exhaust air. So it's a heat exchange device, a ventilator that uses heat exchange. So that on a day like today, it's 22 or 25 in Buffalo, the incoming air is heated by the exhaust air. And so instead of getting 25-degree air, you might be getting 60 or 62-degree air coming in. And so you still need to heat that up to 68 or whatever you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot easier to heat 60-degree air than it is 25-degree air. So that's the third thing. And the fourth thing would be to remove or to make a house as thermal bridge free as possible. So an example of that is like the studs in a stick framed house. If they're 2x4 studs, that's about an R3.5. So if you put insulation, you might get R15 in between the studs, but you still have a leak every 16 inches in a house. So what's been happening, and energy codes have caught up with this in the last several years, is that they want to see continuous insulation. So ideally you would have continuous insulation on the outside so that those studs are covered up as well as the cavities filled. So you eliminate the thermal bridges, and that can happen also around windows where you have stud packs and things like that. And then the last thing is to use high performance openings, doors and windows that are instead of R3, which is what you can commonly buy, U factor of 0.29 to 0.33 or something like that. You can get Passive House certified windows that have an overall U value of about as low as 0.14. So you're looking at like an R6 or R7 window. And the difference there is an interior surface temperature, which is 10 to 12 degrees warmer. So if you're sitting next to a window, like I am now, this is one of the R3s, you don't feel the window or the coldness sort of sucking the heat out of your body. So those are the concepts of Passive House.
Very interesting. Now, you mentioned indoor air quite a few times, and I am always talking about indoor air quality. And actually, this one week during February is National Cancer Awareness Prevention Month. And each week I themed after the prevention month. So I did water, I did food and wine, and one week I did indoor air quality. And all I did talk about on all my social platforms was indoor air quality. And I'm talking about that a lot with everything. Yeah. So I know indoor air quality, as I already mentioned, is more polluted. They say 2 to 5 times, potentially even higher than that, than outdoor air. I would think probably in your practice, you are designing with that in mind of what can pollute our indoor air when it comes to building materials.
Sure. Yeah. And that's something, as soon as we start trying to build airtight buildings, that's something that we're concerned with. So we started out, most of the high performance buildings we did were actually straw bale buildings. And we, the last one that we did was down in the Jamestown area. And the roof and the frame of the building were made out of something called structural insulated panels. And what that is 2 layers of OSB oriented strand board, which is like plywood with styrofoam in between, and it acts as a unit. It's also called a stress skin panel. So the structural part of it is just the outside layers, but the further apart those layers are, the less the stress is in them. So they work very efficiently. So what we did is we built a frame with studs that went from floor to roof out of these SIP panels, and then we infilled in between those studs with straw bale. And so we have the straw bale itself, whether you lay it flat or on edge, is about the same. It's about an R30 to 33 wall. And then we evaluated the studs themselves, and I think we came up with an average R value of about the same, because the OSB would be about an R14, and then the insulation in between the OSB would be probably about R50 or 60. So you have more or less a monolithic wall that's insulated. And the OSB is covered with plaster, and we typically use clay plaster from the yard, from the land that the
So
house
cool.
was built on. So we did that there. The inside is I forget how thick it was, half an inch, 3/4 of an inch of clay plaster, and then we also applied over that some clay plaster finishes. And the exterior had a 3/4 inch layer of clay plaster, and then we put regular siding over the top of that. So it's a wood exterior. You wouldn't stand back and look at it and say, oh, there's a straw bale building. It had a lot of other green features to it. It had a living roof. It had rain gardens, so there was no
Nice.
net runoff on the property. And we tried to make it as airtight. And so we sealed it as best we could and used energy recovery ventilation, again, to get that constant flow of fresh air. So using clay, there's been research on clay that says that it actually absorbs toxins. It's beyond
I've heard that.
VOC. So we've done that a lot, and since that time, we've used clay paints as well. Like in my house, we've got clay paints on almost all the walls. Our bedroom we recently did with clay plaster. It's a slow process, plastering, and it takes some skill, which I'm not that great at, but it's coming along. Almost every other room except for the kitchen is clay paint, which
So the room behind, the walls behind you, the yellow is clay paint?
that is actually a reclaimed paint.
Okay.
There's a company in Niagara Falls that recycles paint.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
we wanted to try that out. So I think this one was a low VOC, but not necessarily zero.
Right.
Yeah. So in terms of materials, the finishes are the big thing. Adhesives, sealants that are used in putting
Right. So now we're talking generally for any common person going out and wanting to remodel their home, because a lot of people are doing that, as we all know. Kevin has some ideas that if you're trying to do a few things on your own and you don't need to hire Kevin or an architect, and you're doing some small remodeling, what to give us, and I'm sorry I cut you off, I just wanted to segue into what you were going to mention. So there are some things that a lot of good things that people can do to keep your house low toxic.
Yeah. So, with many houses have carpets, wall to wall, and that's something that I haven't researched a lot. Mostly we have hardwood in our house. But carpets are, one of the things with carpeting is it's often synthetic material. So, but there are certain companies, and this is going beyond indoor air quality to just sort of sustainability in general, sort of circular economy kind of thinking. That if you're buying synthetic products, you want to buy synthetic products that have a high amount of recycled content and are 100% recyclable. So that's one thing to consider. With other flooring surfaces, hardwood is great flooring. It's expensive. If you can't do solid hardwood, you can do engineered hardwood with layers of plywood and a hardwood veneer. And you can check on the finishes that are used. Check on the VOC. Some of them have like Green Guard ratings too. You can look for that. Um, bamboo, is also a great hard wearing product, and it's a rapidly renewable resource. The only downside to bamboo is that it's probably coming from China, so it's been shipped a long way. So if you're looking at the overall embodied energy, that's another thing to consider.
Right.
We have linoleum in our kitchen with, natural linoleum comes from the same root as linseed, linoleum. It's a natural product of wood, and it's a gorgeous floor. What we're finding is that there's not many installers that know how to do it right. So we've had, I think, for 15 years in one of the joints. We only have one joint, but it started to open up because it's sort of living. It's just like our cabinets are wood, solid wood, and we have a challenge with them in August. You can't close the cabinets because they've swelled up just from moisture content, and then we have to wait till October before they shut all the way.
I love how you said they're living. They are. I mean,
Yeah. So the linoleum floor is like that too, to take care of them. But they're much, vinyl anything basically. There's all kinds of vinyl surfaces, but in a home, I wouldn't use vinyl for indoor air quality reasons.
right.
It does off gas. It's also a toxic material. It's basically polyvinyl chloride, which is toxic to make, and if there's a fire, it's toxic again for people that are fighting fires. So what else? Ceramic, stone, flooring materials are great. We just recently installed a quarry tile floor, which is ceramic, actually, in our vestibule, which once upon a time was an exterior porch. So it was actually sloped because it had to slope for drainage. And so we've improved that and have a hard, wearing surface for coming in and out from the outside.
What do you find to be the most durable with all of these materials that you use? I mean, just off the top of my head, I mean, cork doesn't seem like it would be, but maybe I'm wrong.
One of my colleagues loves cork, and we have it in our office.
For floor?
Down for flooring. Yeah. It's used for insulated, exterior walls.
Okay.
Cork is great, but it's coming from Portugal too. So
Right.
it's not. Those are just things that there's trade-offs with almost anything.
Of course. Well, reclaimed wood probably would be the best, right?
Yeah, but
so
even
it's not painted.
Yeah, right. Cork is really great. It's a wonderful, forgiving surface, and it wears surprisingly well. I know my colleague Sandy uses it in bathrooms in her house, and it is a wonderful thing. She actually has environmental illness, so she's always been like the canary with any products that we're looking at.
Well, she's very sensitive to any of the outgassing of anything, right?
Yeah. Outgassing, VOCs,
Right.
as mold issues.
So that's what you have to consider anytime you bring anything into your house, whether it's paint, flooring, carpeting, anything you're remodeling with can bring in some of these horrific chemicals. And Kevin's firm, of course, is vigilant and not building with these terrible ingredients. And if you do your research a little bit, you can find alternatives, because there's a lot of great alternatives out there, Kevin, right? I mean, for you to find like low VOC paint years ago, I remember you had to kind of go high and dry before the big guys like Sherwin-Williams and C2. I mean, they're almost everything's low VOC now too, but those are those products are more common, I guess, is what I was getting at, that people, you can find alternatives if you do a little research. It might not always be at Home Depot, but you can find some of these things that Kevin has mentioned here, from reclaimed wood, bamboo, cork, stone, wood finishes. So you just have to do your research. So what else, Kevin? Anything else that you can add if people want to redo their houses, or anything that we missed or we didn't touch on here?
You know, I just came from visiting a house that was remodeled recently, and I went to look at some issues they have with like icicles forming on the outside of the house, and draft issues on the inside of the house. And so if you're going to do capital improvements to your house, if it's more than painting or putting in new finishes, just do it right. Do it. If you're going to put in, expand your house with some conditioned space, make sure that space has continuous insulation. Build it as airtight as possible. You won't have an issue with indoor air quality if you're careful with the other materials that you use. But if you make it tight, for instance, this house was re-sided. It has fiber cement siding on the outside. One of the problems that they first showed me when I walked in was a kitchen cabinet on an outside wall, and you could actually feel the cold air blowing, from between the wall and the cabinet. Now, you're not going to rip the house apart completely, but if you're taking the siding off and putting new siding on, you can put on continuous insulation on the outside, which is a complete air barrier. And then you can put in, higher performing windows at the same time. So we're looking at doing an unconditioned space. We have a side porch on our house, and we're getting prices for enclosing half of it so that we have sort of a sunroom / mudroom.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. And I'm getting prices on Passive House certified doors and windows for it. And what I'm expecting is that that's going to increase the usability of that space. It might be if it's it's sunny now, and it might be usable this time of year,
right,
without any heat provided to it. So that's my advice. If you're going to do something where you're going to spend some money, just do that right, and the rest of the house, as you improve things, just try to improve the envelope.
Right.
So,
I always try to tell anybody, even something like this, or if you're trying to detox your kitchen or get chemicals out of the laundry room, or your cosmetics, your cleaning supplies, you don't have to do it all at once. Just pay attention to one thing that you're doing at a time. If you have wall-to-wall carpeting, and that wall-to-wall carpeting is covered in dust, which most wall-to-wall is, they are constant dust collectors.
Mm-hmm.
Just do that one room, just take it slow. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed if there's, oh my God, I got to do this. Just one thing at a time is the way to do it, and appreciate that one change that you make in your house to make your house a healthier house. So thank you, Kevin. Is there anything else you want to add?
I think you said it right there. It can be overwhelming, and especially if you're dealing with a house that's not healthy.
Right.
But, I think we've kind of covered it.
Thank you so much for joining me today on building or remodeling a healthier, sustainable house. Check out their website. I will post it. It is fabulous. It's loaded with all this great work that they are doing. and so much that they are bringing, reusing, but also using sustainable materials. So thanks again, Kevin. I really appreciate you coming on here with me today, and I will talk